So thank you for joining. I see still folks joining. I see Alex joining from Derby, unless Mangus already joined from Andover. Will Black is here from Haceville. Raven is joining. Well, Nick, we'll get started, and then as everybody joins, we can start with introductions, and then as we get more folks joining in, introductions can begin. So I'll start with WAMPO staff. Peter, Nick, and myself are here, but still we go through introducing all of ourselves. So my name is Chad, also with WAMPO. Nick and Peter.
I'm Nick Flanders, Senior Transportation Planner here at WAMPO, and I will be giving the steps to submit a project and resources available to help with it presentation after these introductions. And so while I'm sharing my screen in full presentation mode, I can't see any of the other meeting participants, so just be aware of that. Peter?
Sorry, Peter, I forgot to remind unmute.
I'm sorry, Peter Moore here, Principal Engineer here at WAMPO.
Nick, should we go with introductions all the participants, or should we go right to the agenda?
How many participants is that right now? I can't see.
About 13, including WAMPO staff.
Yeah, we might. I think maybe one sentence per.
Okay. So Les Mangus, Will Black, please introduce yourself so that we all know who are all here. Thank you.
Sure.
Will Black, City of Hayesville.
Les Mangus, City of Andover, and TAC member.
Allison Smith, KDOT.
Lynn Packer, Sedgwick County.
Sean Mays, Paul Guzman, and James Wagner, City of Wichita.
Alex Lane, City of Derby.
Raven Alexander, City of Wichita Transportation Department.
I think Joel is here. Joel forgot the city jurisdictions Joel is with.
Mulvane.
All right. Anyway, we are unable to hear from Joel, so I guess we may. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. This presentation is to assist our member jurisdictions, and then Nick, Peter, and the staff compiled all the resources that are helpful in completing the call for projects. And in the end, Nick will also share what are the next steps after these. So with that, Nick, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. As you should all know, that we are currently in a combined call for projects for Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050, which is due to be completed by June of 2025, and the next federal fiscal year 2025 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program due to be done by August 2024. We combine these two calls for projects for two reasons. First, it saves you all, hopefully, at the time that would be needed to do two applications instead of one. And second, it will make it easier to ensure consistency between the MTP and the TIP. So hopefully that works. And you have through January 5th of 2024 to get these applications in. And you get them from either the TIP page or the MTP page of our website as shown in the links on this slide. And this is being recorded right now, so we can provide these PowerPoint slides if you want them. So keep that in mind. And on those MTP 2050 and TIP pages, you scroll down to the text that looks like this. And this button in the center is what you use to download the application form, which is in Excel format and is used for both the MTP and the TIP. Also on this page, you will find links for downloading cost estimator tools, which I will go into in a moment. But one for each of several different project types prepared by PEC for us to help you with coming up with cost estimates for the MTP projects in particular. And finally, once you have everything finished, please send the completed applications and the cost estimator used to complete the application, if applicable, to me at nicholas.flanders@wampo.org. First, I am going to go through the tabs in the application form. And during the question and answer period, I would be more than happy to do a screen share of the actual form to help you out. Now, the first tab is called Instructions. And we strongly urge you to please read the contents of this tab in their entirety before doing anything else with the rest of the application. The second tab is called Project Information. Please fill this out both for MTP projects only and for projects that need to appear in the TIP and MTP. Then the next tab is for TIP projects only. That means that projects that are expected to happen in 2028 or earlier, and therefore would have to be in the TIP in addition to being in the MTP. You'll find that the contents of this tab mostly mirror information that is requested in the project templates that we have distributed for the TIP amendment cycles in the past. So that should be mostly familiar territory, unless it's been a very long time since you had a TIP project.
Nick,
Next is a tab. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, could you make the screen big or the slide bigger?
On my end is at full screen. Can you are you able to minimize the gallery at the top of your screen?
Well, it's just not on a full slideshow. But anyway, okay, sorry. I'll just
Sorry.
get the slide.
I don't know what to say. I'm at full screen on my end.
There is a way to check one more time, Nick, if it's possible to display setting.
Chad, how does it look?
Same,
you?
Alison is right. It looks divided. I see your notes. I mean,
Oh,
two
you see,
slides.
you see the, oh dear.
No, not the
Okay.
notes. Sorry, not the notes. The next slide. Yeah.
Oh, you see the one with the preview of the next slide?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Sorry,
okay.
not the notes.
That explains it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here.
So there's an adjustment. Alison is right.
Okay, let me see here.
So, James, do you also see divided slides, James, from Wichita?
How is it now?
So
It's the same.
It's the same.
The 2/3 of it's a slideshow and a third of it's the next slide coming up.
There for a second, it changed to having a strip at the top. like that. I see, but I don't see any of your shared screen.
I think that is a shared screen.
Oh, I don't, maybe it was your shared screen. I don't know. It just said names on there, so. What about view options?
How is, what does it appear like now? Does it appear like the regular slide editing view or the full screen?
Regular slide editing view.
Okay.
This is perhaps okay, regular slide.
Let's see.
I may have missed it, but I think, because I was on a phone call there shortly. Have you tried just doing your slideshow and then at the top you can swap the display screens? So if you hit F5, that'll start your slideshow.
I'm gonna try doing it share on the PowerPoint specifically.
Yeah, so go ahead and start your slideshow.
How does it look to you now?
That's
Because I see it as,
and then at the top, can you do that display settings and switch your displays? It's at the top middle, kind of.
displays, my display settings. In
No,
top
go back to
middle,
the screen you were just on.
in PowerPoint.
Yeah. Start your
Where
slideshow
display
again.
setting? Where
You
display
have to start
setting?
your slideshow again. You can hit F5 or you can hit the start slideshow. And then above your slide,
There's nothing above my slide.
you don't see
Nothing.
the show taskbar and then display settings with the
No,
drop
there is
down?
nothing above my slide.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's okay then.
Nick, if you could just send out the slides, I guess, so we can read them afterwards.
Let's see.
So Allison says send the slides later and proceed with what is displayed on the screen.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, that's probably does it.
Monitor 2.
That's,
share screen 2. Share. How is it now?
it's good now. Perfect.
Okay, good.
So
Okay.
sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry about that. Okay. I just talked about the TIP projects only tab, which mostly just has information that is the same as what is in the TIP amendment templates that you've seen before. The next tab is called MTP goals. And this has 4 free response questions on it. Each one should be filled in for any project for which you are seeking WAMPO suballocated funding. And for each of these, it is to determine how the project serves, if it serves, each of 4 draft goals of MTP 2050, summarized as safe and reliable, equitable and accessible, connected and multimodal, and environmental and financial stewardship. And you are encouraged to be as detailed as possible in answering these. So a response may be 125 words or more, in fact. So for example, you can't just say, yes, our project serves this goal and then not elaborate. That would not do well for your project if you did that. Now just a quick screenshot of the instructions tab that we asked you to read first. you'll find that these instructions on this tab mirror several of the major points that I'm making in this presentation. And on the project information tab that must be filled in for every project, you're asked to provide the date of the application and the lead agency that is submitting it, as well as any agencies that you are partnering with for it. And if it is a project that needs to be added to the MTP, you have to say what the proposed MTP action is. Now, it may be a project that is in the current MTP, Reimagined Move 2040, that you are asking to have carried over into the new TIP, or as the case may be, not carried over, either with or without modification. And then, of course, as I imagine will be the case with a lot of these, you may request that a new specific project be added to the MTP, or request that a category of project to be added to be prioritized for funding in the MTP, and then accounted for in the fiscal constraint analysis that is associated with it. So, for example, there could be a project called Bicycle and Pedestrian Improvement Projects that you request be prioritized in the MTP, or bridge rehabilitation, for example. In the past, we have called these bucket projects, but I know that terminology is not preferred, so here we say category of project. And then for projects that are expected in 2028 or earlier, you're asked to provide the proposed TIP action. Now, you may ask that a project be carried over from the old TIP to the new TIP, either with or without amendment. And to be clear, if a TIP project is in the outgoing 2023 to 2026 TIP, and we do not hear otherwise from you, our baseline assumption is to carry it over unchanged. But you also may ask that a project from the current TIP be removed from the new TIP because you are no longer pursuing it, or that because you have already done it, that it be marked complete and omitted from the new TIP on that basis. Or you can ask that a project be changed, or especially for the years 2027 and 2028, ask that a project be added new to the TIP. Although there could also be new projects in 2025 and 2026, 2027, 2028 would presumably account for the majority of them, especially since for 25 and 26, there are still 3 more amendment cycles to the 2023 to 2026 TIP that will happen before the new TIP is adopted. And so for projects in those years, amendments could still be put in prior to that, provided that it's not a new project being put in for funding. So for example, we have carbon reduction program funds for 2025 and 2026 that could go into a new project with this cycle. Then you are also asked to indicate if the project or project category that you have proposed be prioritized for WAMPO sub-allocated federal funding specifically. And this applies whether it's a project for the TIP or a project only for the MTP in a future year, because we need to be able to tell whether or not something should be prioritized for WAMPO sub-allocated funding in the future or not. And it would help us greatly if you would also say which of our sub-allocated funding programs you think it would most likely qualify for among Surface Transportation Block Grant, which covers most of the projects that we fund, congestion management and air quality, which, so long as we remain in attainment for air quality, can be used on all the same projects as Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, but we still try to get onto projects when we can that would qualify for the CMAQ funding, i.e. projects that would, true to the name, mitigate congestion or improve air quality. Transportation alternatives projects, which are mostly bicycle and pedestrian related projects, although there are a few other categories, or carbon reduction program projects. which, true to the name, are primarily about reducing carbon dioxide emissions from transportation, not any other greenhouse gas, only carbon dioxide. And then you are also asked to indicate if any other federal funding is expected on the project. So for example, KDOT would have their own federal funding sources completely different from the WAMPO sub-allocated ones. And then sometimes also the local governments would have federal funding from some KDOT programs not going through us. And then of course, transit funding would go into this category as well with the FTA section, so-and-so, the projects. Continuing on the project information tab, you're asked to say when you expect the project to happen. Now, if it's something that would qualify for the 2025 to 2028 TIP, you're asked to say the specific year of 25, 26, 27, or 28. But if it's just a project that for now will appear in the MTP, you're asked to select one of the time bands of 2029 to 2032, 2033 to 2040, or 2041 to 2050. Or you could indicate flexible, meaning it could be put in any of those time bands or multiple time bands, depending on what your requirements are. And then after that, you're asked to provide estimated project cost. Now, I will get into the cost estimator tool that is supposed to help with this in a moment. But for now, know that you're asked to provide here both the preliminary phase costs that generally do not qualify for federal funding, and also the qualifying phase costs, so construction engineering, implementation costs for planning projects, or transit capital and operations costs. And then the form will automatically calculate the total project cost from those two. And then we would calculate the 80% qualifying federal funding amount from the construction cost, from the construction and other qualifying phase costs that are provided. And then these next fields are more that are copied from our recurring TIP project templates, and so they should look familiar. We ask for a narrative explanation both of the project and what you want done with it, a title of the project limits, and please, if your project does have limits, i.e. a physical location in the WAMPO region, that you provide a map of it on the supplemental materials tab, which I will discuss in a moment. Naturally, as with any project, you're asked to provide the scope, and you're asked to select from a drop-down list of the mode or type the project is, i.e. bridge, bicycle/pedestrian, road, highway, etc., and indicate which county or counties it is in, and provide contact information, and then there's finally a field just for additional notes you want to provide us with on the project, in case there's any information that does not fit in another category, to make sure that we know. And then as promised, the TIP projects only tab mostly copies information from the form that you have seen before from us, including a field for asking about which MTP project is consistent with, if it happens to be consistent with a project from the current MTP, Reimagine Move 2040. Now, obviously, since the projects for the 2050 MTP have not yet been set, we couldn't ask you about how it's consistent with that MTP, but we can at least say how it is consistent with the current MTP, and then that would help with decision making. And of course, for TIP projects, we ask for the same project funding table as before. Now, we do not require something this detailed for the MTP projects, but we do for the TIP projects, asking for funding by the federal fiscal year in which it is expected to happen, for each phase of the project, and for each funding type, and whether it's advanced construction or not. So depending on the combinations of those things, you would wind up with several rows potentially for each project on this table. And then, as I described, the MTP goals page, in which you actually make free response answers to these questions about how the project is consistent with the draft goals of MTP 2050. And then we will consider those MTP goals responses in conjunction with your responses on the supplemental questions tab. Now, this is specifically for projects seeking WAMPO sub-allocated funding in 2025 through 2050. Though, yeah, and it includes regardless of whether or not they're expected to start after 2028. So this would include the TIP project seeking WAMPO sub-allocated funding during that period. And you'll notice that on this tab, there is a Word document icon like that. And for those who aren't familiar with this functionality in Excel, that means that there is a Word document embedded in the Excel file that is completely within it. It is not just linked to a Word document located elsewhere. And if you double click that Word document icon, it will open it in a separate window. It will look like any other Word document. And if you edit it and close it and make sure to save the Excel file, then the changes to the embedded Word document should be saved that way. Now, for your own purposes, you could absolutely download a copy of this Word document outside of the Excel file and then work in that and have that for reference. But we do ask that you provide your answers in the one that is actually in the Excel file so that we can receive one file from you after this instead of two for each project. Because since we expect to receive submissions for so many projects and one application per project, it can get unwieldy if we had to match up Word documents with Excel files for each one in such a manner. And the answers that you provide in the Word document will be used to determine the project scores that the WAMPO staff and consultants from PEC will calculate and then present to the project selection committee. Oh, hang on, someone's trying to get into the meeting. Okay. And those project scores will be considered by the project selection committee, determining which projects to recommend, although the PSC is not obligated to give priority to funding the projects with the highest scores. And those scores were based on scoring criteria adopted by the TPB back in 2021, available from the links that you see here. Hang on. And those links to the scoring criteria are also in the application, so you can get to them easily from that to tell how your answers in the Word document you can expect to be judged. And just a quick note, we have added a couple of questions to that Word document that are specific to making sure whether or not a project qualifies for carbon reduction program funds, because certain project types qualify for that funding automatically, and others who have to provide proof of how it will reduce carbon emissions. Those project scoring criteria I referenced that were adopted 2 years ago have distinct but similar scorecards for each of these project categories: bridges, traffic management technology, roadway reconstruction / modernization and spot mobility, roadway expansion for the case of adding through lane capacity, and a separate one for creating entirely new roadways, a scorecard for multi-use trails and bicycle facilities, a scorecard for other pedestrian facilities such as sidewalks, street paving, or projects for ADA compliance, a separate scorecard for safe routes to school infrastructure, and one for transit expansion and modernization. Here's an example of one of those scorecards for the case of bridges. It has points coming from different categories adding up to 100, weighted in different ways. Most of these are categories that are repeated for most of the scorecards, but there are differences, both in which categories are included and how they are weighted. But most of them have cost effectiveness, public engagement, consistency with regional plans, equity, and a few others. And in that other link that you see at the bottom of this screenshot, leads you to a more detailed accounting of how we score things. So you can whereas this one is more generalities, with the last time that we prepared the TIP, the 2023 to 2026 TIP, staff here at WAMPO established more concrete ways of judging what score something should get on these measures. So that can give you a better idea from that. And the next tab is just called Statements of Assurances. And this is for any project that's seeking funding in the TIP, but it's real simple. It's just an assertion that your jurisdiction has the means to complete the project on schedule. And this one works similarly to that Word document. You double click on that PDF icon that you see here. And once you do that, it will open a form fill type PDF. And once you fill in the necessary fields there and close it and save the Excel, then you should be all right for that. So basically, as I said, it really is just an assertion that the project can be done as proposed. And then the final tab is called Supplemental Materials. Now, the first thing is that it is on this tab that we request that you embed the map that I requested for any project that has a specific physical location. Now, obviously, if something is region-wide or city-wide, this would not be necessary. But also on this tab, we ask that you embed any supporting documents or files for the answers that you gave back on the supplemental questions Word document. So for example, we would ask that you provide here any documents or files you have about traffic counts or bridge load ratings, air quality reports, and also letters of support for the project. In fact, you could also, if you wanted to, insert in here the cost estimate model spreadsheet once you finish it. You don't have to put that here, but you absolutely could. And here's a screenshot of that. And as you can see, there is instructions for how to embed a file inside of an Excel worksheet. And we ask that you put the embedded files as icons inside of the large rectangle box on the right of the screen here, and follow the instructions for embedding it. And this is very important. Make sure when you embed the file that it be truly embedded, to be completely inside the Excel file and not not linked to the original file location. Otherwise, when you send it to us, it will link to a location on your computer system, and then we won't be able to get into it. And also note that we ask that you provide these applications back to us by email, but WAMPO cannot receive email attachments larger than 25 megabytes. So if your attachments that you put in here in the supplemental materials would make the overall Excel file more than 25 megabytes, even after zipping it, to please consider getting us the supplemental materials in some other fashion, perhaps multiple emails if each one is small enough to go on its own, or some sort of file transfer site. We can discuss that as it comes up. And now, as promised, I'm going to go a little more into the cost estimation model that PEC prepared for us. Cost estimates are required for all MTP 2050 projects, including the ones that are not seeking WAMPO suballocated funding, because we still need to come up with a fiscally constrained project list for the MTP. And we had PEC create a standardized cost estimation model in Microsoft Excel for all of you to use for two reasons. First, we hope that this will make it easier for smaller jurisdictions to create cost estimates when they don't have the resources to do a full professional engineering estimate, especially on a project that won't happen for a long time. And then the other reason is that this will help us make the cost estimates more consistent with one another. And when estimates are not consistent in the assumptions that they use, then that will need to be documented. So you may have a good reason to use estimates that are based on assumptions that do not come from the cost estimator model. But if so, you would have to provide us with the reasoning for it and the exact assumptions used for it. Now, the cost estimation model that you have been provided with via the website assumes various unit costs, such as per lane mile or per square foot of bridge deck, and it assumes certain ratios between engineering costs and construction costs for each project type. And consistent with what KDOT does for its own projects, it assumes an inflation rate of 4.5% per year, projecting from a base year of $2023. I see something in the chat now. Has anyone run a trial on the cost estimator? I tried it and it was about 30% short of my engineer's estimate. I'll confess I don't believe we've done a test of it against a specific project like that. We can get into that in the question and answer period, which will begin in just a moment. Just a couple more slides here before that. Anyway, 4.5% inflation per year projected from 2023 US dollars. So you are requested to enter 2023 amounts for the starting point for this. And then the projections are made out to, if it's 2025 to 2028, to the specific year, or if it's one of the three time bands for after 2028, it will project to a midpoint year in that band. So midpoint of 29 to 32, midpoint of 33 to 40, midpoint of 41 to 50. A second. There it goes. Now, as you saw before, there are separate downloadable Excel cost estimators for each of these project types: bridge rehabilitation, bridge replacement, roadway reconstruction, roadway expansion, new roadway, turn lane, traffic signal, bike lane, intersection, and sidewalk or multi-use path. Now, of course, this is not exhaustive of all project types, but we hope that this will at least cover a very large percentage of projects that are submitted for the TIP and MTP. And for the ones that are not covered here, then we will request cost estimates with documentation of the assumptions that went into calculating them, such as for transit vehicle replacement. So you would have to come up with estimates without this tool for that kind of project. You'll notice that there are blue cells in the cost estimator. Those are the ones where you are supposed to enter information. All non-blue cells ought to be locked. And then you are also requested to pay attention to the instructions on the right-hand side of the tool, as well as to the comments from the little red flags that are on some of the cells. Down at the bottom, you can see results of the cost estimator model for the total expected cost of the project in 2023 dollars, the total cost in year of expenditure dollars, and 80% of the qualifying phase costs, i.e. the maximum that could qualify for WAMPO sub-allocated funding from construction engineering, implementation, what have you. However, up above that, you see circled here, there's total inflated pre-construction costs and total inflated construction costs. And this is, again, just from the example of bridges. No, sorry, roadway expansion. This is from the example of roadway expansion. So this may look different in other ones, but look up to here for the information that you are requested to enter in cells H47 and H48 on the project information tab of the main project application. And now we can go into the question and answer period, and I guess we'll start with Les, since you had that question about the cost estimator not giving the answer you expected. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I started on an application that was already in the existing MTP, and I entered my length and so forth and came up 30% short of what my engineer had come up with. And I wondered, was there a factor in there for storm sewers and roadside paths and so forth?
Let's see, which category was this?
It was a road project.
Okay. Roadway expansion, reconstruction,
expansion.
Expansion.
Right. So
Will the
it
proposed
talks about
roadway
lanes, talks about lanes of roadway. It talks about curb and gutter, but we have 10-foot side paths on one side of the street and 5-foot sidewalk on the other, and underground storm sewer, and it just seemed to be woefully short.
Let's see. So would that storm sewer be part of the utility relocation?
No, it's new storm sewer back of curb.
Okay, I guess we'll take this into consideration. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, we can report this to PEC and see if there is modification. Also, we need to check if there are contingency factors applied to the final cost estimate. And like you said, Nick, before, that if there are already cost estimates prepared by jurisdictions, we could receive those.
Yes.
And this is serving in the absence of any like if Les Mangus has these estimates already prepared, that documentation would help us accepting that cost estimate. This is to just serve in the absence of any of those.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So Les, you absolutely can provide us your estimates. They just need to be well documented. And to be clear, are you seeing the cost estimator on your screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
What I don't see there is an add-on for a roadside 10-foot bike ped path, or a sidewalk, or storm sewers.
Well, we have a separate sidewalk and multi-use path tab on here that I suppose could be used for that. But yeah, we will need to discuss on our end the storm sewer part.
I think most of us are including sidewalks and roadside paths in our roadway projects.
Okay.
Hey, Nick, this is Lynn
Yes.
Packer. For what it's worth, I think
Yes.
Les is onto something, including an option or a variable for adding sidewalk and or bike paths would be very helpful because that is a common addition to road projects these days.
Got it. Got it. And have that in the same cost estimator, not as a separate one.
Correct. I agree with that.
Okay, got it. Then also look into the storm sewer question. Yeah. Okay, we have that noted and we will look into it. Are there other questions? Looking in the chat.
We can move to the next item on the agenda, Nick.
Okay.
Click the note.
Okay. Since we only had one question, we'll now go to next steps. I have this separated out by next steps for the TIP and next steps for the MTP. And since it's nearer term, we'll start with the next steps for the TIP. Obviously, the first step is to get your applications into us no later than January 5th, 2024. And then in January and February of 2024, the WAMPO staff and consultants will review and score the projects. And those scores will be considered by the project selection committee in March of 2024. And at those PSC meetings, there will be opportunities for at least some project sponsors to make presentations to the PSC of why their projects should be funded. And then at the April TAC meeting, they will make a recommendation of which projects should be recipients of WAMPO sub-allocated funding based off of what the PSC presented to them at their level of recommendation. Then at the May TPB meeting, the TPB will make their official judgment of which projects should get WAMPO sub-allocated funding in the 2025 to 2028 TIP. And meanwhile, in March through May of next year, WAMPO staff will develop the text of the new TIP for all the other sections. Then June 12th through July 11th of next year, we'll have the public comment period. And at the July TAC meeting, a recommendation on the complete TIP. And at the August TPB meeting, a final vote on approval of the new TIP to get it into the Kansas STIP in September of 2024, right before the start of federal fiscal year 2025. So that is the timeline that we are working on here. And next steps for the MTP, obviously the first two are the same. Get your applications into us by January 5th, and then WAMPO staff and consultants will review and score the projects. Then in March through June of next year, a few things will happen. First, there will be a public survey about the candidate projects in which members of the general public will see the candidate projects for the MTP 2050 listed and get a chance to say which ones. Oh, Allison's asking to be readmitted. Sorry. Anyway, in March through June 2024, there will be a public survey on the candidate projects for MTP 2050. And also the Project Selection Committee and Plan Advisory Committee will have their meetings on recommended projects for the fiscally constrained project list for the MTP. And again, this will be an opportunity for project sponsors to make presentations to the Project Selection Committee about why their projects should be prioritized. Then at the June TAC meeting, they will provide a recommendation on the fiscally constrained project priorities for MTP 2050, which will go for a TPB vote in July of 2024. And then meanwhile, throughout 2024 and 2025, WAMPO staff will continue to work on the updating of the other chapters and appendices for MTP 2050. And then then we'll have a public comment period for the hopefully finished MTP 2050 in March and April of 2025, going to a final TAC recommendation in April of 2025, and a final TPB vote on approval on May 13th, 2025, bring it in a month ahead of the approval anniversary of the current MTP from 2020, 5 years before that. And here just is the project timeline for the MTP that you have seen at the ends of TAC and TPB packets up to now. Currently, we're in 2023 under the call for projects and working on the fiscal constraint analysis. Then in 24, we'll have the public engagement round 2 starting in December, actually, through February. And that will be for the preferred scenarios for the MTP. So these will be broad scenarios about the general direction of development and transportation projects to assume in the project, but not to specific projects at that level. And then the project selection and prioritization in 2024, and public engagement round 3 at the same time about that. And those projects come up with a draft plan in 2024, and the public comment period plan approval in 2025. And in case anyone wants to refer to it, we have the detailed information on the progress of the MTP 2050 here as well. Thank you. And just in case you have any more questions, we still have plenty more time in case you want to ask them. I am willing to stay on the line in case we have any late arrivals who'd like to ask something after other people leave. In fact, I'm willing to just stay here with my headphones on until the end of the time, even if I'm the only one here and someone wants to come in with a question they forgot about earlier. So thank you.
Nick, it's Allison. I'm just going to email you and Chad and Peter questions.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional information staff can provide? James or Lynn or Les?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I just want to say thank you for putting everything together in this application packet. The calculators and everything will be helpful. So I definitely appreciate the effort that went into that.
Thank you, Lynn. And we just want to, the reason for this presentation is, even after the presentation, we want to be there as you need us. Okay. So looks like there are no more questions, Nick. So we can thank you all for participation. Appreciate it. And
Yes, thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nick, are you still on?
I am still on.
So do we need to fill out the cost calculator for each project, or if we already have an estimate, say it's programmed in our CIP, can we just use those costs?
This would be for a
City of Wichita.
project in 2028 or earlier.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you have that level of estimate, then you can provide that to us with the documentation. So it's basically a TIP project at that point, rather than only being an MTP project.
Documentation, is that just showing a copy of the CIP?
We need to know the assumptions that went into it.
So you have to have some type of breakdown.
But do we have to have a breakdown, or can we just, we program our CIP out 10 years and we just use the numbers that are programmed in that are based on recent bid prices we've had on projects. Can we just put that as the assumption, or?
If it's if you have actual bids, then sure you can you can tell us that is how you arrived at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what do we do if we don't know what bike projects that we will have in the future for the MTP? You talked about not having a bucket, correct? Or you're changing the wording
not using
of
not using the term bucket.
Right. Okay.
Right. So there will be most likely categories of projects in the fiscally constrained list, not just individual specific projects. So there may be, and if I were a gambler, I'd say probably be a category in that list for bicycle and pedestrian projects that would allow those to be funded without being specifically listed in the MTP.
That's what I would like to see personally.
Yes.
We are in the process of updating our bicycle master plan, but that will not be completed until 2020, at the end of 2024. So I don't know what's going to come of that. We have Redbud the next few years that we will be funding, but beyond 2026, I don't know what the next bicycle project that will be a priority for the Wichita until we get that plan done. So if there could be a category of bicycle projects that just have, set aside funding for that category, that we could then, as we know the projects, get them in the TIP, I guess.
Now, to be clear, we do have a category like that in the current MTP. It was amended into it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think you'll carry that forward in essence? Similar? Just the different name?
It's not my call, obviously. That has to go to the PSC and the Plan Advisory Committee and the TAC and the TPB. But my guess is that they will probably agree to continue to have a category like that.
And that would hold for the bridges as well, because, we do those inspections every other year. We're in good shape, but something might come up and we don't know what that would be until it does. So if we could have a similar category for bridges, that would be helpful as well.
I'm making a note of that.
Okay. All right. Any other?
We mentioned ITS. I can go specific.
Yeah. Okay.
ITS, bridges, and bike ped.
Yeah, ITS could be similar too, Nick. Intelligent Transportation Systems. I don't know. We could probably have a few projects that we would need, could think of for the TIP, but as technology changes so quick, I don't know. Probably a category for the MTP for that would be helpful as well.
What are you doing for East Kellogg? Also, Nick, sometimes there's like a pretty key piece of infrastructure that gets built that we just don't have on our radar now. Like there could be a new police substation somewhere that also could do it. If there's any other kind of major developer that comes into the area, building infrastructure, that sometimes sways stuff beyond what we can forecast. But
I'm not sure a police substation would be something that would go into our TIP though.
No,
No,
I'm
it wouldn't,
saying,
but to get the communications out
Yeah,
to
it might-
ITS, you know,
start tipping some prioritization on where I might be wanting to put some fiber for communication.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
not the station itself or in the tip, correct, Nick?
Okay, got it. Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's
Yeah,
all
thank
I
you.
have.
the,
Oh, go ahead.
oh. No, I was going to sum up that you're requesting that there be bucket projects, even though we don't use the term bucket projects in the MTP, for bicycle and pedestrian projects, for bridge projects, and for ITS projects.
Correct.
Okay.
What else are we talking about, Sean?
Good for now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Probably could send him a sample one of each type.
I'm sorry, I just realized I didn't have my video on. Sorry.
That's quite all right.